Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, I want to talk about the important aspect of force energy physics, which is one aspect, and we're going to be changing all of this because all the old terminology is just that. It's kind of old, it's arcane, and no longer valid, just like the term radionics, which only a very small percentage of the population knows about. And I probably educated most of the public on radionics in the last few years, because if you look at the interest in it, it's a very small interest in it, even though it has been more popularized lately, but in a very small subculture. So really what we have to talk about, as I originally started a few years ago, which is manifesting scientists, manifesting physics. And that's what we're talking about. And this covers everything. To isolate manifesting technologies just to health or spiritual or anything to do that is a misnomer. So it's really not true. So it covers everything. And I've spent most of my life in the metaphysical aspects of producing things like success, protection, and things such as that, not working in the well-being area at all. Yet radionics basically was developed by a medical doctor and then moved into medical circles and then ultimately preserved as we know it today by Ruth Drown, the chiropractor, who saved radionics after the persecution of herself and, of course, after Abrams died. He wasn't really persecuted that much. He was put into question, really never proved his technology, and wasn't able to because he died young, like it seems like most alternative practitioners do, particularly radionic people. And there are reasons for that, and we've got into that in other discussions, and I will cover that here as well, I should say, in other videos. But the bottom line is that the use of this in its purely energetic fashion to take care of your well-being is a critical part of everything, because we all need that kind of help. And we find common type practices to be very lacking. And that's why people keep searching for alternatives. And certainly homeopathy, which again is completely and totally misunderstood, and probably most people don't know what it is anyway, is one of those energy alternative healing methods that is pretty much legal around the world, while treating somebody with radionics is not legal unless you're in a few states of the United States and a few countries. In the United States, there are a few states, one of them is New York State, that allows doctors to do anything they want that is non-invasive. Well, so there are doctors, medical doctors, that actually practice radionic healing, which is one aspect of radionics, in their practices. And the problem is basically they're harassed and shunned by other doctors, and there's a social pressure for them to not do it. But it is perfectly legal to do most anything in New York State as a medical doctor that is non-invasive, and they aren't harassed or anything else. Now, this was not the case, and if you're a medical doctor in other states and you use alternative stuff, you can get yourself thrown in prison. So this is very common, or it used to be. So these are all part of what's going on in the bigger picture that few people understand. So the whole idea is to heighten your bioenergies for every possible task. If you want to be a high-performing manifesting scientist, there are many tools that you use, and the crude older radionic machines are really passé, and all these dials and stuff are kind of jokey, as I've talked about. They do absolutely nothing. They're psychic tuners. This I've proven. Those of you who want to see all the guts of everything can go to All Access membership, which has been actually decreased in cost. And you can go in there and look at all the guts of these machines. There's nothing in them. Whether they're electronic, non-electronic, whether they're non-electric, whether they plug in or not plug in, all of this, I have figured out what the energy is. And of course, it's not too difficult when you go through all of these machines made in the last 100 years, and there's nothing in them. There's no electricity going through anything. Most of the time, the electricity goes to light a light bulb that when you click the machine on, people think something is happening. Now, this isn't fraudulent. This is just giving you a psychic crutch. And it's a big, big subject matter of all this stuff. And what is a psychic crutch, psychic tuning, etc. And we know that all this works fabulously by a William Bengston. I mention him often. He wrote the book, The Energy Cure. And for 30 years now, he's been doing research, healing people of every possible disease you can think of, including cancer, by doing it simply psychically. At a distance, close, he's done mice studies and everything else. Very professionally done this and has reams of research proving his method. So I recommend everybody get that book, Energy Cure, and look up William Bengston. Check it out. So the point is that proves the fact that you can just tune into somebody and cure them of cancer. And he's done it repetitive times. So what is a machine? Well, a machine is just the same thing, except you got dials on it, and it clarifies your procedure. And I think having a machine is very important, and it does clarify things. And we found out, of course, that psychic power is very weak. So you have to amplify it and transmit it, which is what our basic systems do. So, but to think there's something happening by turning dials that connect to absolutely nothing, that are not powered in any way, is amusing and stupid, the people that believe that. And of course, it's very much confused with Rife Technologies, which is using common frequency, cycles per second frequencies that are out there and to affect by this particular frequency. But that is not radionics. And actually, radionics, or informational energetic fields, create all matter. And they create, of course, the electromagnetic as well. So these are all the things I've discovered 50 years of research, and really solves all the problems in this particular area and so many other problems as well. And it's indirectly backed up by common bogus science and the that think they know everything. Well, a lot of the understanding of this is still based in this kind of understanding a certain reality that we have to start with, instead of everything just meaning nothing. So it is backed up by basic quantum physics, which have been proven to be very effective and being used every day. So when we move into all these things, we have to understand what the energy is if we're going to make technologies and use it, etc. And this seems to have eluded everybody but myself. And people coming from backgrounds that have used this kind of tech for many, many years are still caught in the old paradigm of understanding things as it was understood basically 125 years ago. And this is a big error. We need to move on past all these things and understand what's going on in the bigger picture, and what we can now understand with many years of research. But people aren't doing that. They're going back to the original discoverers, who have very quasi results. I mean, Abrams refused to be tested. We don't know how successful he was or not. He died young. His proteges, or his assistants, were tested, apparently, and I'm not sure how real anything is, and they failed horribly, as did Ruth Drown, who was again. But was Ruth Drown told, you better fail or you're going to be in trouble? So we just don't know the intricacies of it. I know the real world, so things are not exactly that straightforward. There's all sorts of things Ruth Drown was tested with and failed horribly, so it is stated. There's also a lot of people that claim that she healed them of horrible diseases as well. And this technology was taken over and taught to George de la Warr in Britain, who apparently excelled in healing people as well. His research, ironically, was turned over, apparently, near his death, to Christopher Hill's organization, which now we just don't know what happened to it. I'm assuming this stuff has been stuffed somewhere or destroyed. Very sad. De la Warr apparently didn't leave it to the Radionic Institute or Association, as I thought was going on. And apparently their history is a little bit confusing, as well as what's happened there. Who started it? What happened? I thought de la Warr had started it and left all his information there, but apparently he didn't. He left most of his research reports, and a lot of his tech was left to Christopher Hills, a fellow Brit who was very popular and very wealthy at the time that all this happened, and died, again, no, I wouldn't say fairly, I think it was in his 70s, but certainly didn't live that long. Basically the person who brought spirulina to the public, Christopher Hills, and wrote many books. at the University of Trees, etc. All of these are, and had some very, and had interesting tools. We show a lot of his boards there. He had a lot of other tools he did. He was very big into homeopathy. He was very big into radionics, pendulums, etc. The whole field, supersonics, he called it, and he has a book on it and several others. Very good stuff, very interesting. But you got to remember, you're talking about 40 years ago. So what was known then and the tools used then were pretty primitive to what we know now, and all the developments and the now hundreds of millions, if not billions of people who are involved in these kind of practices, either directly or indirectly. The huge amount of people using pendulums, radiothesia, dowsing, radionics, homeopathy, all the other subsectors of all this stuff, and it is a real problem. That people don't quite understand this. But we're moving into one of the major areas, and what is one of the problems with radionics is that basically radionics as a term and as an understanding, particularly within the United States, is an illegal practice when you're using it. And you could be called that in general illegal, but certainly is illegal if you use it medically. Unless you're a medical doctor, and very typical in the United States, as laws change from state to state. So it really just depends, just as there's states in the United States where it's 100% legal to have recreational marijuana, meaning you just go buy it in a store. Medical marijuana is even legal in more states. So it's very individualistic, but it's illegal federally. And as such, there's all sorts of banking problems, laws, interstates. So if you go from one state to another and you're carrying marijuana where it was legal in one and not in the other, well, you can be thrown in prison for a very long time because it's legal in the state, which is basically, in America, there's not even really differentiation. There's no borders. You go on a road, and one day you're in one state, and one day in your next state. And isn't there four corners? There's one particular place in the United States where I believe it's Nevada, Arizona, California. I forgot all the states, but four corners where all the states come together. So some of those states it's legal, for marijuana, other ones it isn't. So we run into all these problems, and this is kind of true all over the world where there's individual states, and this is true as well in many different countries in Europe where there is no legal marijuana in Europe whatsoever. So put that stuff about Netherlands, the Hollandish, the wooden shoes people. It is not legal there, never has been, and they arrest people every day growing marijuana in Holland. Yet the Dutch have an unusual way of looking at things, and that means basically they kind of look the other way. They did the same thing with prostitution. I believe prostitution is now legal, and they're still trying to crush it over there and push prostitutes into certain areas, and so forth. So it's not what you think is going on there. There's one little town in Switzerland, apparently, that it is legal marijuana, but this is not the entire country. But apparently that marijuana there, and the Swiss in general, the Nazi bankers that they are, you find marijuana smoking everywhere all the time, and it's just not enforced again. But this is not true in any other place. Medical marijuana is legal in a few countries in Europe, but it is recreational marijuana, has not gotten there, and it won't get there until the people who run Europe, the Germans, are able to take over the market and do it there. And they're preparing for that and have brought in, of course, Canadians to help them with all this process. Now, marijuana is legal in Canada, as federally, and they export it around the world to people that want it. So these are all things that get confusing, but these are all little facts and figures everybody should know. So the bottom line is the alternative practice, and there's all sorts of laws governing everything that is and has been legal thanks to a San Francisco judge, well, who else, who a group of people were able to sneak through legislation to legalize homeopathic or homeopathy, whatever you want to call it. Now, what is it? I'm going to talk about what it is and what's going on. It's a fairly long discussion here. I try and keep things short, but you really can't pass on good information quickly. You want sound bites? Go find out what Tom Cruise is doing, or some of those psychotic Scientologists who want to persecute everybody. So that's the nature of getting more in-depth information. But homeopathy is something that everybody should look into, discover. You can buy these preparations very easily online. In larger cities, you may even have a homeopathic, quote, pharmacy. They certainly have a huge one in Santa Monica, Los Angeles, California area. And it's pretty well known. And because it is so innate, meaning it's very difficult to hurt yourself with this, it either works or it doesn't. And what you're really dealing with is energy. That's all homeopathy is about. It's about taking energy or vibration. And we're not talking about electromagnetics here because it has absolutely nothing to do with that whatsoever. So we're talking about something that runs into the manifesting sciences and manifesting machines and technologies, commonly called, incorrectly though, radionic type machines. But and of course, as you said, that terminology is something that needs to change. And we need to move something, if we're going to be using these things for higher purposes that affect well-being, we're going to have to put things in proper terminology that they really are and not use what are outlawed terms. So, and that's exactly what radionics is. It's an outlawed term. And as you said, it's a misnomer coming from Ruth Drown, who thought it was some sort of ray was put out, some sort of radio type signal. And of course, her background was in electronics, as was Abrams, who she was her secretary, I was told. I don't know if that's really true or not, because I don't think she was that old, but I've been told that he was a secretary for Abrams for a period of time and learned from him. I don't know. Certainly fascinating. She had school. She had all sorts of other things. Very, very fascinating person that there should be a documentary done on her and Abrams and other people as well. So that people can get a better information there. But, you know, this would cause a tsunami of problems within the alternative industries. So this is very, very important to understand. But homeopathy is very interesting in its concepts, which is basically, now there's a lot of things behind. I'm not going to go into a long explanation of what homeopathy is, and really the way it's described classically online and everything else is pretty bad information as well. It's based on very old understanding of things and not the new things that are out there. But to break it down for us to understand what homeopathy is all about is that this comes from a particular person who started homeopathy. A guy called Christian Hahnemann, who was in the 1700s, who was a German who discovered this, who was a medical doctor. He did graduate medical school. At that particular time, and you're talking about the 1700s, going into the late 1700s, going into the 1800s of when he discovered this. He wrote a lot of books on it, did his practice, etc. So it's really hard to find out. This is, when things get this old, it's very hard to find out the facts and figures, how successful he was or not. With all of this, but has stayed around and been kept around for whatever reason, mostly because it's very inexpensive to do, and it basically doesn't do any harm. So just the fact of using the placebo effect, which has been hailed and ran up the flagpoles, particularly by modern science, modern medical science, which has a history of failure, they're running up the polls that at least almost 20% of people will get amazing results just from the placebo effect. And the medical sciences went so far as to say that they tell people, here, take this pill, it'll cure you, but remember, there's nothing in this pill. It's just, there's nothing in it whatsoever. Just take it and you'll see you'll get results from it. So, and even doing this, telling them the actual truth that's going on, people have been able to get results. Of course, this is contradictory on a lot of different levels, including the fact if that's the case, then you have to add that into testing, which they don't. They do add placebos into testings, which I consider to be morally horrific, that you're giving sick people nothing, dooming them, just to see if your little testing methods work. So it's a really horrible thing, but I'm not going to get into that as well. But basically, it means that no matter what is put out there, telling somebody to eat dirt off the ground, 20% of those people will get results from it if you tell them that eating dirt off the ground will cure you of whatever. So we need to keep that in mind. Now, There's a big misnomer that actually Hahnemann discovered this. Well, he really didn't. He got his information from his vast amount of research he did. Now, he's a very interesting guy, and of course, he made his living for many, many years as a translator of Latin, Roman, Greek, and of course, many other, including Middle Eastern translations. So he's very big into languages here. So he got information from many, many different sources, including, I believe he was fluent in Hebrew, Arabic, Chaldean. I mean, these are these ancient texts. You know, that what people don't understand is you got to remember that the Middle Eastern, or we could say the particularly pre-Islamic, but even during Islamic times, that there was a great scientific community there, and a lot of things that we get today come from there, which are not given credit for these people that did a lot of scientific work and were very advanced in their own way. Once Islam took over, like all religions do, they came in and they put everybody backwards. I mean, we'd be still in the Stone Age if it was up to the born-again Christian types out there, and the Amish types. We don't use no electricity. What's a wheel? So this is the kind of nonsense that we'd be stuck in if we followed these religious belief systems. It's not just from the Middle East, but they had a lot of advances. They did a lot of scientific work. They had huge libraries they accessed. And remember that Islam invaded and held, as did the Greeks, for, I believe, 700 or 800 years. The Roman Greeks were occupying Egypt. And all the words you think are Egyptian, like pyramid and Thoth and Isis, well, these are all Greek words. Bet you didn't know that. So, and the Greeks were very proficient builders, as were the Romans, etc., and had some great discoveries, and of course took information and then gave it its own unique Western spin, where everything that we know of today that's kept in high regard all comes from the Greeks and the Romans, and with a lot of little icing from the Egyptians. So, no, let's not. And of course, so we must understand that since Islam occupied Egypt, they went in and robbed the same stuff that everybody else robbed and put it in their institutions, etc. So everything really comes from that kind of little circle of the world. And the great discoveries, whether it's electricity from Galvani and Volta, all these were the Italian, Romans, and of course all the great thought came from the Greeks and the Romans. This has been perverted in modern times to give the psychotic realm to people like Freud and all the other people of that particular area, and their Schopenhauer, their psychotic belief systems, Marxism, all of this radical nutjob stuff that doesn't really equate to life, all comes from that particular cesspool of reality of Europe. So, but let's not encompass them with some of the great scientific and advanced studies that particularly Middle Eastern countries were. And one of the reasons why the Islam was such a great conquering country, and the reason why they moved so quickly, which few people understand, including occupying Spain for 800 years, and Portugal, and other places, and of course all of North Africa that they conquered, was the fact that they had a lot of tech behind them. They had, their armies were very modern. They had engineers, they had techs, they developed equipment and everything else. This was one reason why they're able to advance quickly. Our modern numbering system comes from your Middle Eastern areas. I don't know if it's Syrians or whatever. But, the 1-2 stuff we have. We don't use Roman numerals. I think we all were taught this in school, but we're not using these arduous systems of these squares and blocks and lines. The Romans were so advanced. And of course, it is kind of a simple system if you think about it. But using an actual numbers like is used in the West now, well, this comes from the Middle East and their discoveries. As I said, unfortunately, like everything else, people go downhill as soon as conservative, backward religions take over for profit and for their own personal sexual perversion, which is what all religion's about, regardless of where it comes from. So, we must remember that. So Hahnemann was well versed in all of these very arcane and interesting Chaldean. So the whole idea is that this wasn't something that he invented He got this from old texts. Very few people understand that, but there are references to this, and he didn't invent this. So, like, just about everything that particularly comes from what people consider today the country of Germany, or understand by Germans as Deutschland, was never ever their original invention. I can't find virtually anything that was originally coming from that, even though they claim it. It's like a bad joke. The Russians, it used to be like this in the 70s when there was the Cold War, is that the big joke was that, people would talk about the great inventions of the West, and the Russians would scream, "We did it first." So it's that kind of comical thing. But basically what this is all about when we get into it is, what did Hahnemann decide to do, which again is in ancient texts, particularly there's Egyptian texts that use poisons to trigger the body. Now, using poisons to put the body into a survival mode goes back thousands and thousands of years. And as I said, he discovered this probably in these Arabic texts that he was reading. It's hard to find out exactly, but he certainly wasn't going to give credit to somebody else. So, but this was the guy who spent a lot of his life translating from all these different languages as a translator, and discovered many, many things that he couldn't find in his own German language. And this is still the case today. Very few texts are really translated from any. We have 2% of Tibetan healing texts are in English. And of course, we have millions, if not billions, of pages of information and writing from ancient societies that we don't understand at all, that we've never translated it. And we never would have even translated ancient Egyptian if it wasn't for the Rosetta Stone, which was a stone that showed the alphabet and translated the Egyptian hieroglyphics and writing, because they have two different, there's Egyptian writing and hieroglyphics, into Greek. Again, people should know the facts of what's going on. This is history, baby. And not the crap you get from your bogus teachers who are just little dictators in their classroom to show everybody how smart they are. So the use of triggering the body into a massive healing reality, so that it cures what's ever happening. So the body is united against a particular illness 100%, because it sees it as a poison, and that the extinction of the entity that they are will happen unless you fight this poison. So basically that's what homeopathy is about. It starts with poisons to trigger the body to high states of actual fighting whatever problem that may be. To simplify it, now, I can put this into very complicated things and spend 4 hours going into all this, and I don't think anybody cares, and nobody really wants to become an expert. That's what you hire experts for, and then they say, "Here it is, take it." That's right. That's what I want to. I don't want to learn it, but I'm a professional researcher. This is all part of force energy physics that we have to take to the next level. And the problem is that the entire industry has been caught up in the lies and deceits of the modern people, trying to use old stuff that they don't really understand, and slavishly following the beliefs of the originators when they should be moving ahead. Or they want to computerize everything, which doesn't add up. Computerization, the electromagnetic process that is, produces nothing. It's great for what it does. Word processing, making files, watching bad stuff on the internet, and all the other stuff that we get from computers, which are fantastic assistants. But you can't computerize. There's no such thing as artificial intelligence. This is just a computer program that takes processes for you, which is really nothing new. It's just what it's doing is finally taking computerization to the point of not just helping you, but doing something for you. So instead of giving you a website and you get what they call builder programs, where you build it yourself, putting your information in, they now have things which will build it for you. Well, I want to make a vitamin C site, and they'll make a vitamin C site, putting all this information in there, which saves you a lot of work. Now, I'm not sure that's all that valid, but if you can go in there and get a lot of work done and then go in and modify it yourself with your information, could be a great help. So again, they're tools that help you. But there's no such thing as artificial intelligence. The human consciousness, brain, and functioning really cannot in any way be copied. Just like robots can't move, what it takes to stand up on two legs is mind-boggling. All the things that have to happen to do that. So trying to build a robot to do that is near impossible. And that's why we have pretty bad robots and they don't work right. And you get Elon Musk giving you 2 seconds of crap stuff because none of the robots work. And they can't possibly do that, make things to that extent. You have to build androids to do that, which we can barely, we don't even build our bridges up that trucks run over, and we can't cure most diseases, but we're trying to build androids. But of course, that'll happen because the number one need of society is to murder each other. And of course, we need sex robots because of the problems in relationships as well, which nobody gets along. The Japanese are now having single marriages. You kind of marry yourself. The evolution of the super wealthy and smart people. Yeah. All of them either have legalized prostitution and sex robots. That's where your advanced societies are going. How nice. And let's not forget the Japanese basically rubber sex toys, which they have in human form. And of course, they also have them made in children's forms. We love them Japs. They're just pouring toxic water in the ocean now, and you'll get to eat that. All them sophisticated Americans, particularly LAites. Let's get some more sushi. Okay, so the whole idea is that we have all these problems that we have out there to understand these issues. Now, so the whole idea is that if you use minute quantities of poison, your body will do something. So let's say you're having a lung problem and you have the poison, and these are just examples for you to better understand. Let's say you have a poison from a snake, and what does that snake do when it bites you? Your lungs collapse and you die because you can't breathe. So you take minute quantities, and this is how it started off, of these, and getting the correct amount is very difficult, but even goes beyond that, which we'll get to in a minute, is that you would take a pinhead of this poison, and your body would send and let's say you have a very bad lung infection, your body's going to say, look, they're shutting our lungs down, we better protect the lungs, and send all the energy to the lungs to cure that lung disease, which has nothing to do with the bite of that particular snake. Okay? Clear? Is everybody got that? So what happened with this is that once you use minute quantities, people find out, well, if you're using such a dilute version of something, which is virtually almost non-existent, you bring it to even being more non-existent. But you keep cutting it. Now, this means that you've made the preparation more powerful. What? I used to argue that this is ridiculous. When you start cutting something, there's nothing left of the physical substance. Well, that's right. And it doesn't make sense. If you keep diluting something, you're going to get less and less of the original until you can disappear it. There's just no trace of it. But that's not what you talk about when you're talking about energy. What you're doing is taking, and I talk about this all the time, taking the physical and making it into the energetic. So because everything is energetic, everything starts from energetics and it ends in energetic. So if you want this to work at a very high level in you, you've got to take the energetic or the physical and make it into the energetic. I've talked about it. People want to put colors on their radionic machines. They want to put crystals and stones. Well, these are physical objects, and you're getting very little energy from it. Colors can work if you broadcast or shine the color, which is a photon or a laser. You get results because you've now taken the physical and turned it into a photon, which is very non-physical. Is it a particle? We don't know. Is it a wave? We don't know. 500 years of study, we still don't know what light is. Thank you, Newton. So the whole idea is that all the things that go with that, we have to understand the bigger picture here. So the whole idea is to go from the physical, which has a very, if you give somebody a poison, it's going to kill them. Breathing stops, heart stops. So if you're having heart problems, you want to give somebody a heart toxin. So all the energy goes well, the body is tricked to saying, oh, well, we're going to die, let's heal the heart. But you got to make sure you don't give them too much or it will kill them. And if you give them too little, does that mean it? Well, you don't want to do that either. So you turn the physical into the energetic to put it in a particular understanding. That's what homeopathy is all about, kind of in a nutshell. As I said, we can go into the many facets of it, the many realities of it. I'm not sure Hahnemann really understood stuff. And we have to make sure we take things from, this is 200 years ago. We have a whole different understanding now. And of course, people have done all this stuff. And when we start looking at all these traditions, things like Malcolm Ray cards, which are nothing more than symbols representing something, and you make a symbol of it, then you transfer that into a physical object, to a person or to water or into a crystal that you then take that non-physical energy. So this is all part of the study that people just don't understand. It's very complicated. And probably if you wanted to learn all the ins and outs of force physics, and of course my course will give you a good introduction to it, but if you want to learn all the ins and outs of it, you really have to be trained by a master, and pretty much I'm the only master out there. And it's going to take you about 10 years. So, I mean, there's a lot to learn and understand. And you can repeat things to pass tests like they do in regular education. Well, what does that mean? Blah, 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 blah. It says right in the book. Okay, next. Is Gilligan Island on? Is Zorro on after that? So the whole idea is this is what, you regurgitate information without really understanding it, and this is called education. But if you really want to learn the ins and outs of this, it's going to take at least 10 years for you to be pretty proficient at it and be to an expert level. And that would require lots of thinking and an awful lot of guidance, which is what, of course, regular educations do when you get a master's degree, etc. You're working with people in the field who are masters. So, and the concept behind it is good, but what they're training you for is not. So the whole idea is you keep taking that physical until you make it the most powerful level where none of the physical exists, but only the vibration exists. And of course, that's right. That's where everything comes from. That's what I'm trying to pound into people's head in the last year or two here, because I have discovered all of the way things work. And it's as simple as that. And it looks like I'm the only one that really understands it. One of the problems is people get stuck in listening to the old timers who have started things and deserve some credit as pioneers. But look, how can we possibly give anybody credit of something that was 300-400 years ago when we know so much more today and we have ways of detecting things? And as I said, these are great guideposts, but they are now so old that we have to throw them away to a degree, at least the complicatedness of them in terms of the details, and move into the details we know today. But the people out there are too cowardice to do this, and they really don't have the intellectual value to do it. Most people are just boobs, whether they come from, quote, common boob science or alternative boob science, because everybody's a boob. Just as simple as that. And they don't know anything. They haven't done the research, and they don't have the intellectual capacity to actually understand the bigger picture and haven't done the research, worked with the equipment, engineered it, taught it, etc. So it's a whole process. If you want to become a master, it probably takes several lifetimes, and we have a very short lifetime to do it in, which is the reason why we really never get anywhere. People have about 50 years, if they're lucky, of productive life, and then it's gone. So actually, this was caught on in homeopathy, of course, in terms of the bigger picture, has been something that the, quote, royal family in Britain, of course, has been a big into, so it says. And of course, they certainly have lived all long lives, from the queen to the king to everyone else. So part of their longevity can be attributed to actual homeopathy. And of course, from what I'm told as well, is that they also have used radionics for years. They just don't publicize it. And of course, the new king, King Charlie, has always been a big supporter of it, but I'm not sure what he's continuing to do or not. All of Europe has dropped homeopathy in reaction to a lot of it, from the unamazing, deviant James Randi, and his organization, who went in there and attacked homeopathy like he has any background whatsoever. I saw a documentary on that, and he was messing with the bottles, hiding them, doing all sorts of stuff they had no business doing and has no background to do it with. So if he wants to question it and he wants to sponsor it, he should be a third party, not involved in the process of rigging things. And I believe he rigged things. Personally, that's my opinion, so it wouldn't work right. So to give this uneducated, he didn't even graduate high school, by the way. This guy's done nothing. He's got a bizarre history, and he was, of course, funded to attack the medical industry in particular and